Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the top 3 skill lines that I recommend for solo class builds, or I should say solo builds. With the upcoming group area, the night market, this type of build is probably going to help a lot. I'm assuming that you're needing a build that is effective enough to go into something like Veteran Vateshran Hollows to be able to do fairly well into that environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my top 3 skill lines to pair together in this video. This is just my opinion. If you disagree with that, you can build however you want. I'm just giving a suggestion, and then I'm going to cover also why I feel this way. So let's start with number 3. We're going to go with animal companions in this one. The reason why the ultimate is really good. Before I do that, I'll go into a respec here. You can I recommend picking the Wild Guardian. It has the bleed and chance to inflict hemorrhage status. Just remember you're going to need to double bar this so that the bear stays out at all times. This does a lot of damage even if you don't fire off the ultimate. Another good reason to have this skill line is the major and minor breach in an AoE that lasts for 10 seconds. So this is a really good way of putting some good penetration on your enemies. Just about 9,000 penetration on your enemies. So if you have 9,000 penetration on your build and then you fire this off in a dungeon instance, for example, you're pretty much going to be at the pen cap for that. So this is a really good implementation. Regardless of if you're magic or stamina, I would pick this more so that you get AoE, major, and minor breach in your build. Um, we're going to skip the other skills for now. Um, if you need it, Growing Swarm is good for another bleed damage, but minor vulnerability is a good one here. But we're going to not use that on this implementation. The main 2 skills that we're going to use in this are Wild Guardian and Deep Fissure. And one of the biggest reasons why Animal Companions is such a powerful skill line and why the 3 skill lines that I'm going to talk about meld really well together. This skill line gives you a heal every time one of the skills ends. And then also you get ultimate every time you are using the ability. Every 8 seconds you can get 4 ultimate. This right here is huge. 20% increase to your recoveries. That's a massive jump in recoveries. It's the biggest amount of recoveries that you can get from a skill line. The only one that comes close is the Arcanist Healer skill line, and that is 18%. This is 20, and this is an offensive one. And then the last one, you get critical damage for each uh, animal companion's skill that you slot. So if you just slot the bear and the shulks right here, the deep fissure, then that's going to give you 10% critical damage on your front bar. So then the number 2 slot is Gravelords. Why is this important? This is a massive skill line. This gives you, in just the passives, it makes a couple of the spells cheaper with the reusable parts. One of the most important ones is the Death Knell passive. This gives you 20% increased critical strike chance while the enemy is in execute of 33% health or lower. Then we also get a massive amount of penetration in 3271. Again, that's going to help you reach the pen cap with the implementation of this Deep Fissure skill line. And then last but not least, an increase to damage over time skills. So you're going to want to stack up those, obviously. Another one here, very, very awesome for Stam or Mag, whichever way you're going with this. There are 2 different morphs here, free to cast. They both do damage over time. They both give you major and savagery and prophecy, and they also increase your damage done by 3% while you have it slotted on your bar. So for example, if you pick the Mystic Siphon, the Magicka version, this is going to give you even more recoveries in the amount of 150. And then on top of that, you can use some of these other skills. For example, the Boneyard here, if you want your own synergy here, you can pick the Avid Boneyard, and this will make it so you can synergize with your own skill. And this will give you minor vulnerability in an AoE. The other Unnerving Boneyard also applies major breach in an AoE. However, in solo content, if you're already using, for example, the Deep Fissure skill, this already applies major breach. So if you're stacking these two together, make sure you pick the Avid Boneyard. This allows you to use your own synergy. It's very powerful to be able to get your own synergy in content. It will give you an additional damage there to pop of frost damage on there, and it heals you for the damage done, as you can see for the very bottom skill line, and that's in addition to the Undaunted passive. Keep that in mind. Anytime you're going to hit a synergy on your build, then that's going to proc the Undaunted passives as well, which I'll just back out and go over those in case somebody's not familiar with those. The Undaunted passives down here, this is just a restore energy. When you activate a synergy, you get 4% restore, so that includes health and resources. So keep that in mind, 4% in addition to whatever that Boneyard is going to do. So continuing on with the Gravelord skill line, this is going to be a massive help here, having the Gravelord sacrifice involved. If you're having a lot of damage over time on your build, then you're going to want to pick this morph. This actually boosts the damage on your skill line a lot. In addition to that, this is a really great way to keep your penetration passive going. So I would recommend that. And then I don't recommend the Archer for your source of major brutality and sorcery unless you are building with this skill line and you don't have another source of it. I'm going to show you a better one to use in just a minute. So Flame Skull, this will be your spammable. This is really, really good in either case of either Magicka or Stamina. These are both really good. If you are using this skill line as this skill, either the Venom or the Ricochet, you're going to definitely want to make sure you're implementing Gravelord Sacrifice on your build, because that skill in and of itself makes these do different things. The third cast, while you have the Gravelord Sacrifice going, will create a corpse, and then the Ricochet will make the corpse hit the Flaming Skull hit in an AoE. So that is a really good spammable to use. So those are the awesome ones there. You could slot the Frozen or Glacial Colossus or Pestilent Colossus if you want for certain instances, but I really recommend the Bear. It does a lot of really good damage. Like I said, even if you don't cast it, it is also extremely cheap to cast when it does come up to be usable. But my top skill line to use, and this should not be a surprise to anybody who's watched my content previously, the Storm Calling set from the Sorcerer. This is absolutely a S tier for the solo class builds that I'm recommending. And the reason why, it has just about everything that you need in solo that the other two skill lines don't have. It's got a little bit more recoveries, and in addition to that, it increases your physical and shock damage. This right here, Amplitude, is a really unique passive. This gives you increased damage when you start the fight, so it's almost kind of a reverse bloodthirsty jewelry trait on your toolkit. So this gives you 10% increased damage when you first start the fight, and then once you get past that top 90%, that's when your bloodthirsty trait is going to kick in on your jewelry glyphs, and then you're going to have an increased damage when that flips. So this is really going to help you start out the fight really well to have the Amplitude passive on there. And then last but not least, for all of the Stork skills that you slot on your bar, you get 108 weapon damage from the Expert Mage passive. This one's not as usable because a lot of times I slot this stuff on the back bar, but we'll get into the skills here. The front bar, definitely I would use Mage's Wrath for a execute. If you're on a stamina build, you're probably going to want to use Endless Fury. This is a little easier to sustain because it's cheaper, and it also refunds the cost of the spell if the target dies. And so that'll help you a lot if you actually kill stuff with the cost of the spell. The Mage's Wrath skill does more damage to the enemies around, whereas the Endless Fury hits the main target really hard and then does reduced damage to the rest of the area. So, but still, if you kill something while casting Endless Fury, then this will, for example, give you magicka back. You restore 4860 magicka, so it's more than double what you're casting. So keep that in mind. This will be a lot easier to sustain on a stamina build. So regardless of whether or not you are using magicka or stamina, I would recommend using Hurricane. And the reason why is because Hurricane gives you minor expedition while this skill is active. That's going to increase your movement speed by 15%. And it also does damage, and it gives you major resolve. So this skill right here is doing 3 things for you in a very large amount of benefit there. It does physical damage in an AoE that's damage over time. Then it also does give you a minor expedition and major resolve buff. The other one is 30 seconds long. For magicka builds, you get major expedition for 4 seconds only, and then it does shock damage instead of physical damage. I would highly recommend you stick with Hurricane. Another thing that I recommend when you're building in solo is try to balance out the use of your skills in stamina and magicka both, regardless of what your majority resource pool is. The more you kind of split those up, the easier your sustain is going to be, so that you're not draining so badly out of the resource. If you need an AoE magicka, or AoE damage over time skill, the Lightning Flood is a really good one to use. This can also give you a self synergy that you can pair along with the Avid Boneyard. And then the other skill here, this is absolutely god tier for solo builds. And as I've said in previous videos and demonstrations, this critical surge here can out heal the Pale Order Ring. I've seen it done in several instances, enough to say reliably that this is absolutely amazing. The amount of healing that this can give you alone is insane. This is a 33-second major brutality and sorcery skill that will heal you when you critically strike. So whenever you are building, make sure you have a decent amount of critical chance on your build, and this will absolutely keep you healed up to full easily. This is a very powerful skill. So to close out the video here, I'm just going to go over a couple of nearly mentionable ones for solo content. The Nightblade Assassination skill line is very good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it isn't. I just feel like those other ones go better together. You can really build an offensive build that gives you some defense and recoveries with those top 3. And then also, if you're on a Templar, I would definitely keep the Aedric Spear skill line. The Spammable that is in there is really, really good, and the passives are awesome as well. But those are my honorable mentions there. Those are really, really, really top tier ones. If you're looking for a beam build, obviously the Herald of the Tome, you can't go wrong with that. just standing and beaming stuff is really going to cook your Pale Order ring if that's what you're wearing. Then you can't go wrong with the Herald of the Tome. But if you're looking to get away from a beam build and looking to build kind of a high actions per minute solo build, these three are, my opinion, the best ones to go with. Try it out, see what you think. Storm Calling, Animal Companions from Wardens, and the Gravelord skill line. For weapons, I would absolutely keep your back bar as an infused destruction staff. If you're implementing Major and Minor Breach with the Deep Fissure, then I would recommend going with a shock staff on your back bar so that you can get some off balance in your build. And then your front bar, you can pretty much load with whatever you want, although I will say dual wield is probably the strongest one to go with to increase your critical chance so that you're getting some of this stuff to proc that you need to, such as the heal from the surge. So that would be my recommendation for weapons. Again, for most fights in solo, I would recommend sticking to a Nern and charge setup. The only time you want to switch away from that is if you need some penetration. But with the Gravelord's skill line and the Major and Minor Breach being involved, honestly, you pretty much can just build with daggers. And then if you need to, you could switch your Mundus to the Lover, and you should be well compensated in the penetration category. You can build with medium and light armor. You do not need heavy in most cases, although you could look at doing heavy armor in some spots if you need to really go into some difficult stuff. But for the most part, you can get through most content by implementing Major Minor Resolve and those kind of things. I would recommend, if you're building on a brand new character or choosing something to start with, the Dark Elf is probably one of the best because it is flexible for switching between Magicka and Stamina. Khajiit is another one that is very strong in solo content. It's probably number one in most people's eyes. I just tend to not recommend Khajiit as much anymore because if you ever want to go into grouped content for trials, the Khajiit is really kind of a wasted racial passive because it's so easy to get to the critical damage cap anymore. So that Khajiit passive that gives you the critical damage is pretty much useless in some cases, whereas at least with the Dark Elf, you're going to get 258 weapon and spell damage. And then also you get a lot of max Magicka and max stamina both. So there's a recommendation there for the skill, or excuse me, for the racial passive. As always, make sure you have your alchemy leveled all the way up. Use your medicinal use, and then also make sure you power leveled your provisioning and get that gourmand and connoisseur passive on the provisioning skill line filled in on all your builds. But one more thing before I close out: when you're building, start off by getting your Mundus Stone first. It's a really easy step to forget. I would start off with the Thief, just like this, just to see where your build ends up. If you're kind of short on penetration, as I said, you can always look at your build. If your penetration is not where you need it to be, if you come over to the Lover Mundus right here, is as you can see, it gives you penetration. And I'll look at the character screen here in just 1 second. As you can see, just with no gear on, it gives you 2,744 penetration just by itself. So keep that in mind. That's something you want to look at the very end of your build is whether or not you need to change your Mundus. Also, Scribing can be your friend. If you're missing a buff of some kind in your build, try implementing that on a Scribing skill somewhere. That can really be a game changer. Instead of using, for example, the skill from the assault skill line, the Vigor, which is resolving Vigor. If you're just using this for the heal and a minor resolve, I would prefer that you, or I wouldn't prefer, I would recommend that you try and implement minor resolve in a scribing skill, because it's probably also going to do damage or some other thing as well, and it's probably going to do a lot better job for you. And it also might cost the resource that you need, whereas you don't have any flexibility with minor resolving vigor here. It only costs stamina, and that's the only choice you have. So just keep that in mind. It is a strong skill, and it helps. If you're running powerful assault, then that might be a really good one to use. But keep in mind, scribing can really be a helpful tool in creating solo builds. And so I just wanted to cover my top skill lines for building with solo. I'm going to end the video here, but if you thought this video was helpful or interesting, please check out my YouTube channel. Please consider liking and subscribing. I have over 300 videos on the Elder Scrolls Online video game, and I have organized them all by subject on created playlists. So if you go to my channel and go down to my created playlists, you'll be able to filter through those and find the subject that you're interested in. I pretty much have probably covered something in that area of interest for you. If you want to check that out, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much again, and I will see you in another video. Bye.